Raj Malhotra had replayed the crash in his mind every night for 3 long years. The screeching tires, the flash of the overturned SUV, the wall of fire swallowing the metal. He hadn't seen any of it firsthand, but his imagination supplied every detail. The police investigators had told him the same thing each time he asked. It was a freak accident, a blowout on a wet Seattle highway, a spin into oncoming traffic, and then an explosion. Anika's body had been burned so badly that dental records were the only match left to confirm her identity. Raj had signed the papers with shaking hands, barely able to look at the folders containing the photographs. Since then, life had become mechanical. He woke up, worked as a senior software engineer at a cloud security firm, returned to his quiet apartment, and tried not to think about the empty chair at the dining table. Friends told him to start dating again, to move on, but the words always felt wrong, like a violation of something sacred. Anika hadn't been just his wife, she had been the grounding force that kept him steady. Without her, everything felt off, balance, but grief, as heavy as it was, wasn't the only thing that kept him awake at night. It was the inconsistencies, the way the police avoided answering certain questions, the missing dashcam footage from the tow truck, the fact that Anika's phone had never been recovered. And then there was the strange comment from the first responder, months after the funeral, when Raj met him by chance near Pike Place Market. She didn't look like she died instantly, the man had muttered, as if realizing too late that he shouldn't have spoken. When Raj pressed him for details, the man quickly walked away. Raj tried to dismiss these things as the mind of a grieving husband trying to create meaning where there was none, but the thoughts stuck to him like burrs. Some nights he sat alone, scrolling through old photos on his phone, wondering how such a vibrant, meticulous woman could vanish in a moment of chaos. On the anniversary of Anika's death, he drove to the crash site, now just a repaired stretch of highway with no sign of the inferno that had once consumed his world. He placed lilies on the guardrail and whispered a prayer. As he turned away, the cold wind carried a faint scent of gasoline, or maybe his memory simply conjured it. That evening, he returned home exhausted. The apartment felt colder than usual, shadows stretching longer across the hardwood floor. He tossed his keys onto the counter, microwaved leftover dal, and forced himself to eat. When he finally sat on the couch, his phone buzzed. A notification from the bank. Raj almost ignored it. Alerts from his personal account were routine. But then he saw the subject line, "Activity detected in your joint account ending in 4492. His heart hammered once, then twice. That account had been frozen after Anika's death, untouched for 3 years. No one should have access to it. No one alive, hands trembling, he opened the message. A single line glowed on the screen, a withdrawal of $4,200 has been initiated from Portland, Oregon. For a moment, Raj couldn't breathe. Portland was only a few hours away, far too close, far too deliberate. And then the thought he had buried for years rose like a ghost breaking the surface. Dark water, what if Anika never died at all? The alert pulsed on his screen, pulling him into a truth he was prepared to face. Raj couldn't remember the last time his hands had shaken this badly. The image of the woman at the ATM, her posture, her movements, the familiar tilt of her head, stayed burned into his mind. It wasn't possible, yet there it was, captured in cold grayscale footage. He forced himself to breathe as he replayed the final seconds again, pausing at the exact frame where the hood slipped just enough to expose her face. It was Anika, or someone who lived inside her skin. Still reeling, he leaned back in his chair. The room felt unbearably small, as if the walls were shrinking with every realization. The footage wasn't proof, not yet. It was a hint, a crack in the story he had been told to accept. If he was going to understand what really happened, he needed to follow the trail from the beginning. The bank logs. He navigated back to the dashboard. His training in digital forensics had always felt like a remote skill, something he used to track cyber threats for clients. Now he was applying the same tools to the ghost of his wife. Every click made his pulse pound harder. The transaction history revealed a pattern he had missed in his panic. The withdrawal in Portland had been the second hit. The first, originating from Colorado 5 days earlier, had required a signature verification. He opened the scanned pad authorization again. The name on it, Nina Verma, meant nothing to him, but the handwriting meant everything. He zoomed in, comparing it to an old anniversary card he kept in a folder on his desktop. The loops, the slants, even the tiny pressure variations were identical. Handwriting analysis wasn't always perfect, but muscle memory didn't lie. Whoever signed that name had written thousands of lines with the same habits that belonged to Anika. But if she was alive, why disappear? Why lie? Why burn a car with someone else inside? Or had someone else forged the records, created a fake death, and pulled her away? The possibilities tangled around him like wires wrapped too tight. He checked the Colorado location again, a small bank branch in a quiet Denver suburb. He dug deeper, referencing the ATM timestamp with nearby traffic cameras. Most feeds were too blurry, but one held potential. A street camera angled toward the sidewalk, catching partial views of pedestrians. Pulling archived footage took time. While it loaded, Raj stared at his reflection in the dark laptop screen. His face looked older than he remembered. Sunken eyes, hollow cheeks, a phaged expression. "If you're alive," he whispered, "why didn't you come back?" A soft ping signaled the footage was ready. He clicked on the file, breath caught in his throat. The screen flickered, revealing the ATM corner dimly lit by a flickering streetlight. Shadows stretched across the pavement, distorted by passing cars. He scrubbed forward until movement appeared. A woman stepped into frame, wrapped in a dark rain jacket, hood drawn low. Her stride was brisk, purposeful. Raj leaned closer. That walks, lightly hurried, shoulders leaning forward, was one he had followed through airports, shopping aisles, crowded festival streets in Mumbai. The familiarity cut him like a blade. She paused at the ATM, glancing over her shoulder before inserting the card. Her hands moved quickly, almost nervously. Then came the signature, the same strokes, the same precision. Raj advanced the footage by 2 seconds. The woman lifted her head. His breath vanished. The grainy pixels outlined a face he knew better than his own Anika's face. Older, thinner, shadowed by exhaustion, but unmistakable. She wasn't a memory. She wasn't a mistake in the records. She was alive, living under a name he'd never heard, and she was deliberately staying hidden. Raj felt a cold certainty settle in his chest. Whatever happened 3 years ago was not an accident, and finding the truth would mean chasing the woman who had once been his world. Raj landed in Denver under a dull gray sky, the kind that made shadows look heavier than they should. The footage of the woman Anika, or the version of her calling herself Nina, played on loop in his mind. Every detail from the grainy image seemed sharper now that he was physically closer to the place where she had stood. He rented a car, a modest silver sedan that wouldn't attract attention, and drove toward the suburb listed in the ATM logs. He kept telling himself he wasn't chasing ghosts, yet the further he drove, the stronger the sense grew that he was stepping into a world where the dead moved freely. The neighborhood was tidy and quiet, with rows of pale cutter houses lining clean sidewalks, the kind of place where people jogged before sunrise, watered lawns religiously, and waved to neighbors they only half knew. Raj parked 2 blocks away from the Target address and approached on foot, hood pulled up, heart pounding against his ribs. He expected chaos police tape, something that mirrored the turmoil in his chest. Instead, the street was peaceful, almost eerily so. House number 1847 looked ordinary, light, yellow siding, trimmed hedges, a small porch swing swaying in the breeze. Ordinary, except for the fact that his wife, who was supposed to be dead, supposedly lived inside. Raj positioned himself behind a parked truck across the street, pretending to check his phone while covertly observing the windows. Curtains remained still, no sign of movement. Hours passed. His legs stiffened, but he didn't move. Just when he started doubting everything he'd found, the front door clicked open. A woman stepped out. Raj's lungs seized. It was her. Even under the afternoon light, the resemblance was uncanny. Same height. Same long hair, though darker now. Same way she adjusted her sleeve as though it always bothered her. But there was something different. An absence of warmth in her posture, a rigidness that didn't belong to the Anika he had known. She scanned the street with a deliberate calmness, not fear, but calculation. Then she walked to the mailbox, retrieved a stack of letters, and retreated inside without glancing around again. Raj exhaled shakily. His body trembled with a mix of relief, terror, and disbelief. If this was Anika, she was living a life detached from every memory he held. No trace of the laughter that once echoed through their apartment. No fragment of the woman who danced barefoot in their kitchen. This version moved like a stranger wearing his wife's skin. He needed more than a glimpse, he needed proof. The next morning, Raj returned before sunrise. He stationed himself in the same spot, a thermos of bitter coffee his only companion. At 7, the door opened. She emerged again, this time dressed sharply, hair tied back in a sleek ponytail, professional. Confident, unrecognizable in personality, yet entirely familiar in form. She locked the door and walked toward a dark blue sedan parked in the driveway. Raj followed at a safe distance. She drove to a corporate complex 20 minutes away and swiped a badge that read Nina V. Operations, he recorded everything, her routine, interactions, the firm she worked for. Throughout the day, he observed her from afar, careful not to get close enough for her to sense him. She moved through the halls with a controlled efficiency. No slipping smile, no idle chatter, no softness. Every step felt rehearsed. By late afternoon, Raj's head throbbed with questions. Was she undercover, running from someone, hiding from him, or was she simply someone who looked like Anika, a cruel duplicate sent to torment him? The footage said otherwise, the handwriting said otherwise, his heart insisted otherwise. That evening, he returned to the suburban street, deciding he needed to watch her home, see if her facade cracked behind closed doors. He parked farther this time, hidden between two tall SUVs. As the sun dipped behind the mountains, lights flickered on inside the house. Raj raised his binoculars, hands steady despite the storm inside him. Through the living room window, he caught sight of her again. She moved with the same cold precision, placing her bag on the counter, sorting mail with mechanical indifference. No photos hung on the walls. No sentimental clutter. Everything was clean, structured, sterile. This wasn't the home of the woman who once taped movie tickets to their fridge. Raj lowered the binoculars for a moment, fighting the ache building behind his ribs. Then movement inside snapped his attention back. A shadow crossed behind her. A man stepped into view. He was tall, broad, shouldered, wearing a casual tiche, like he belonged there. He approached her with an ease that made Raj's stomach twist. She didn't flinch, didn't act surprised. Instead, she turned toward him, calm, composed. Then the man leaned in and kissed her. Raj's blood froze. There was nothing ghostly about this. It was real, and it shattered him. Raj didn't sleep the night he saw the man kiss her. His mind kept replaying the scene. Anika, or Nina, stepping out of the house with a coffee mug in hand, her hair tied in a loose knot, looking every bit like the woman he had once woken up next to. And then the stranger appeared behind her, slipping an arm around her waist as naturally as if he had done it 1,000 times. The kiss had been casual, intimate, familiar, the kind reserved for someone you went home to every night. It was the small domestic gestures that hurt Raj the most. She smiled afterward, a smile he used to think was his alone. Raj sat across from Detective Harper in the dimly lit conference room of the Denver Police Department, the fluorescent lights buzzing faintly above them. The table between them was cluttered with files, photographs, and forensic reports, pages that threatened to rewrite the last 3 years of his life. He had thought he was prepared for whatever the investigation uncovered, but the weight of the documents in front of him said otherwise. Harper slid a folder toward him. "These are the re-examined reports from Seattle," she said. "You'll want to look closely." Raj opened it with stiff fingers. He recognized the dental charts immediately. The diagrams he had been shown after the crash, the ones the coroner claimed matched Anika. Only now, side by side with the newly obtained originals, the differences were glaring. Angles, fillings, crown placements. It all contradicted what they had used to confirm her identity. "This isn't a match," Raj whispered. "It never was," Harper replied. Raj's heartbeat thudded relentlessly in his ears. For years he had replayed Anika's death in his mind, torturing himself with details of the crash. But in reality, the tragedy wasn't hers at all. Someone else had burned inside that SUV. Harper pulled out another set of documents. "We found records that indicate the victim was a homeless woman from the Seattle waterfront. No next of kin, no one who would have noticed her missing right away." Raj's jaw clenched. "Hours earlier, you said she was drugged." Harper nodded grimly. "Toxicology suggests she was sedated with a high dose of diazepam before the crash, completely unconscious. Whoever put her in that car wanted no struggle." A cold chill slid down Raj's spine. He pictured the woman, unnamed, unnoticed, used as a prop in an escape plan. Anika's escape plan. The realization came like a knife. Anika and Michael hadn't simply run away. They had orchestrated an elaborate, monstrous substitution. He forced himself to speak. The records, the medical files. How were they altered? Harper pushed another document toward him. "Inside access. Someone tampered with the coroner's database before your wife's case was finalized. The dental records on file at the time of identification were falsified." Raj stared at the words until the letters blurred. Someone had gone to extraordinary lengths, someone meticulous, someone who knew how to disappear, someone he once shared a home with. He rubbed his hands over his face, trying to steady himself. "So for 3 years I grieved a stranger." His voice cracked. "I buried a woman I never met." Harper softened, her tone losing its usual edge. "Raj, we're not done." She reached for one last sheet, printed just days ago. 3 nights before you arrived in Colorado, a hospital in Denver admitted a patient with superficial injuries from a bar fight. Routine scans, routine fingerprinting. She slid it forward. Raj leaned in. There, bold and unmistakable, was the match alert. Fingerprint match Anika Malhotra. He felt every muscle stiffen. She was here. He breathed, not just here. Harper corrected, alive, moving around, using medical services under the radar until someone ran standard prints. She crossed her arms. The system flagged it. She left before police arrived. Raj pushed back in his seat, mind spiraling. So Anika wasn't hiding from the world. She was actively navigating it, slipping in and out of places under false names. Healing from injuries, signing paperwork, living, and all while he mourned her. He swallowed hard. Detective, why stage a body? Why go to these lengths? Harper didn't answer immediately. She let the silence settle like dust before responding. Insurance payouts, false identity creation, and escape. Raj blinked. Escape. From you, from her life, from any traceable connection. Harper paused. The private investigator you hired uncovered something we've been cross-checking. She opened another file. An insurance policy, Raj felt ice trickle through his veins. It's a secondary policy, Harper said, filed under Anika's name, but the beneficiary isn't you. Raj leaned forward, dread tightening his throat. The beneficiary listed was Michael Reeves. A sickening wave hit him. She had planned this, not impulsively, not desperately, methodically, carefully, with another man. Harper continued. The investigator traced the payout. The funds were dispersed 2 months after the crash. The receiving account belongs to an alias tied to Reeves. Raj's stomach twisted. The puzzle pieces he'd been avoiding slammed into place. Anika and Michael hadn't stumbled into a relationship. This was a long game, a calculated escape, a financial resurrection. He could feel his heartbeat in his palms. So they killed a woman, Raj murmured, and made it look like Anika died in the crash. Harper didn't sugarcoat it. Yes. Raj slumped back, staring at the ceiling, the past 3 years collapsing inward like a dying star. He thought he had been grieving a tragedy. Instead, he had been living inside someone else's deception. Harper cleared her throat. There's more. Raj looked up, hollowed. We traced the hospital's internal camera footage. She said Anika wasn't alone. She arrived at the ER with someone matching Michael Reeves's description. Raj closed his eyes, the images forming whether he wanted them to or not. Alive, together, walking freely. Raj, Harper said gently, I need you to understand something. This wasn't just a disappearance. She leaned forward, meeting his eyes. This was a staged death. The words hit him like a hammer. He gripped the edge of the table to steady himself, which means, she continued, your wife didn't just abandon her life. Harper exhaled sharply. She destroyed another's to build her own. Raj stared at the fingerprint match one more time, cold, undeniable proof. Anika was alive, and she wasn't done running. By sunrise, he was still in his rental car outside the suburban Colorado neighborhood, eyes burning as he watched the street empty for the morning commute. He needed answers, he needed names, and he needed someone who could dig without leaving footprints. By noon, he was sitting across from Marcus Hale, a private investigator known for dealing with cases that needed quiet handling. Marcus had a weathered face, a calm voice, and a bluntness Raj appreciated. You're telling me your dead wife might be alive, Marcus said, flipping open a notebook, and is now living under a different name with another man. Raj nodded. I saw her. I'm not confused. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Most people who come in claiming something like this are confused or grieving. You look like a man who already knows something's very wrong. Raj showed him the footage, the bank logs, the signature. The still frame of the woman at the ATM. Marcus watched it all without interrupting, then leaned back in his chair. All right, I'll look into her, but you understand. Whatever we find might not be what you want. Raj almost laughed. Nothing about this is what I want. The next 48 hours crawled. Raj stayed in Colorado, trailing the house at a distance. Nina, or Anika, moved differently now. She walked with sharper purpose, spoke less, avoided neighbors. She jogged every morning like clockwork. She picked up groceries using curbside pickup instead of going inside. It was her face, her voice, her posture, yet something inside her had hardened. The softness he remembered from their marriage was gone, replaced by a cool, calculating focus. She lived like someone who expected danger, or someone who had created it. On the second evening, Marcus called. I found the man. He said, his name is Michael Reeves, gym trainer, works at an athletic center downtown. Raj waited. He also has a record. Marcus continued, financial fraud. Years ago, he was involved in identity manipulation schemes. Nothing violent, but he's the kind of guy who knows how to disappear. Raj's throat tightened. And now he's with her. It seems so. The words tasted like metal. If Anika had run away with Michael, had everything between them been a lie, the late night conversations, the shared dreams of a future, had she been planning an escape even then? Marcus wasn't done. There's more, he said. I started digging into the death records, insurance payouts, that sort of thing. Raj stiffened. Insurance? Yeah. After your wife's death, a life insurance claim was filed. Large amount. It was processed 4 months after the crash. Raj blinked. I never filed anything. No, Marcus said quietly. You didn't, but someone did. Raj felt his heartbeat in his throat. Who? That's the thing. Papers shuffled on the other end. The claim was processed through a secondary beneficiary, not you. The designation was changed a month before the crash. Raj felt like he'd been punched, changed, but she wouldn't, she did, Marcus said. The new beneficiary was listed as a trust, and Michael Reeves is tied to it. The room spun. Everything he remembered about his marriage cracked open. The arguments that suddenly made no sense. The way Anika had become distant the months before the crash. The late night calls she'd brush off. The strange tension he couldn't name. Marcus continued, voice heavy. I also looked into the crash report. There are several red flags, inconsistent heat patterns, missing timestamps. A witness statement that was never filed officially. Raj closed his eyes, gripping the edge of the desk. Just tell me. There was a long pause. Then Marcus exhaled slowly. Raj, the evidence points to one thing. Raj opened his eyes. The car crash wasn't an accident. Marcus said, It was staged. Raj sat across from Detective Harper in the dimly lit conference room of the Denver Police Department, the fluorescent lights buzzing faintly above them. The table between them was cluttered with files, photographs, and forensic reports, pages that threatened to rewrite the last 3 years of his life. He had thought he was prepared for whatever the investigation uncovered, but the weight of the documents in front of him said otherwise. Harper slid a folder toward him. These are the re-examined reports from Seattle. She said, You'll want to look closely. Raj opened it with stiff fingers. He recognized the dental charts immediately. The diagrams he had been shown after the crash, the ones the coroner claimed matched Anika. Only now, side by side with the newly obtained originals, the differences were glaring. Angles, fillings, crown placements. It all contradicted what they had used to confirm her identity. This isn't a match, Raj whispered. It never was, Harper replied. Raj's heartbeat thudded relentlessly in his ears. For years he had replayed Anika's death in his mind, torturing himself with details of the crash, but in reality, the tragedy wasn't hers at all. Someone else had burned inside that SUV. Harper pulled out another set of documents. We found records that indicate the victim was a homeless woman from the Seattle waterfront. No next of kin. No one who would have noticed her missing right away. Raj's jaw clenched. Hours earlier, you said she was drugged. Harper nodded grimly. Toxicology suggests she was sedated with a high dose of diazepam before the crash, completely unconscious. Whoever put her in that car wanted no struggle. A cold chill slid down Raj's spine. He pictured the woman, unnamed, unnoticed, used as a prop in an escape plan. Anika's escape plan. The realization came like a knife. Anika and Michael hadn't simply run away. They had orchestrated an elaborate, monstrous substitution. He forced himself to speak. The records, the medical files, how were they altered? Harper pushed another document toward him. Inside access. Someone tampered with the coroner's database before your wife's case was finalized. The dental records on file at the time of identification were falsified. Raj stared at the words until the letters blurred. Someone had gone to extraordinary lengths. Someone meticulous. Someone who knew how to disappear. Someone he once shared a home with. He rubbed his hands over his face, trying to steady himself. So for 3 years I grieved a stranger. His voice cracked. I buried a woman I never met. Harper softened, her tone losing its usual edge. Raj, we're not done. She reached for one last sheet, printed just days ago. 3 nights before you arrived in Colorado, a hospital in Denver admitted a patient with superficial injuries from a bar fight. Routine scans, routine fingerprinting. She slid it forward. Raj leaned in. There, bold and unmistakable, was the match alert. Fingerprint match, Anika Malhotra. He felt every muscle stiffen. She was here. He breathed, not just here. Harper corrected, alive, moving around, using medical services under the radar until someone ran standard prints. She crossed her arms, the system flagged it. She left before police arrived. Raj pushed back in his seat, mind spiraling, so Anika wasn't hiding from the world. She was actively navigating it, slipping in and out of places under false names. Healing from injuries, signing paperwork, living, and all while he mourned her, he swallowed hard. Detective, why stage a body? Why go to these lengths? Harper didn't answer immediately. She let the silence settle like dust before responding. Insurance payouts, false identity creation, and escape. Raj blinked. Escape. From you, from her life, from any traceable connection. Harper paused. The private investigator you hired uncovered something we've been cross-checking. She opened another file. An insurance policy. Raj felt ice trickle through his veins. It's a secondary policy, Harper said, filed under Anika's name, but the beneficiary isn't you. Raj leaned forward, dread tightening his throat. The beneficiary listed was Michael Reeves. A sickening wave hit him. She had planned this, not impulsively, not desperately, methodically, carefully, with another man. Harper continued. The investigator traced the payout. The funds were dispersed 2 months after the crash. The receiving account belongs to an alias tied to Reeves. Raj's stomach twisted. The puzzle pieces he'd been avoiding slammed into place. Anika and Michael hadn't stumbled into a relationship. This was a long game, a calculated escape, a financial resurrection. He could feel his heartbeat in his palms. So they killed a woman, Raj murmured, and made it look like Anika died in the crash. Harper didn't sugarcoat it. Yes, Raj slumped back, staring at the ceiling, the past 3 years collapsing inward like a dying star. He thought he had been grieving a tragedy. Instead, he had been living inside someone else's deception. Harper cleared her throat. There's more. Raj looked up, hollowed. We traced the hospital's internal camera footage. She said, Anika wasn't alone. She arrived at the ER with someone matching Michael Reeves's description. Raj closed his eyes, the images forming whether he wanted them to or not. Alive, together, walking freely, Harper said gently, I need you to understand something. This wasn't just a disappearance. She leaned forward, meeting his eyes. This was a staged death. The words hit him like a hammer. He gripped the edge of the table to steady himself, which means, she continued, your wife didn't just abandon her life. Harper exhaled sharply. She destroyed another's to build her own. Raj stared at the fingerprint match one more time, cold, undeniable proof. Anika was alive, and she wasn't done running. The morning after Raj received the call about Anika's fingerprints resurfacing in the Denver hospital database, everything spiraled into motion far faster than he expected. Detectives from Seattle and Denver coordinated a joint investigation, and for the first time since the car crash, Raj felt the machinery of justice grinding forward, cold, methodical, unstoppable. He wasn't sure if he was ready for what came next, but the truth was no longer something he could run from. Detective Halliday briefed him over the phone. We have enough to move: fraud, identity manipulation, insurance crime, and now a confirmed fingerprint match. We're issuing warrants for both Nina Verma, your wife, and her partner, Michael Reeves, partner. The word stung like a slap. By noon, police units converged on the suburban neighborhood where Raj had watched Anakin. eat alive her new life. Raj didn't go near the scene this time. He watched from a surveillance feed the detectives allowed him to view. It felt wrong to witness her arrest remotely, but being physically present would have been worse. If she saw him, he didn't know what he would do or what he would feel. The operation unfolded with silent precision. Officers positioned themselves around the small house, weapons drawn but lowered. A negotiator stepped forward and knocked. For several seconds, nothing moved. Then the door swung open. Anika appeared, or the woman she had become. Her hair was shorter now, darker, tucked behind her ears with practiced ease. She didn't look scared. She didn't look confused. She looked annoyed, as if this were an inconvenience she hadn't scheduled for the day. Behind her stood Michael Reeves, muscles tensed, jaw clenched. Police, hands where we can see them. The officers ordered. Michael reacted first, raising his hands slowly, eyes darting. Anika followed, her expression unreadable. When the cuffs locked around her wrists, she didn't flinch. Not even when Michael shouted her name, asking what to do, demanding she say something. She kept staring straight ahead, unmoved, as if she had rehearsed this moment long before it arrived. Watching her like that icy, mechanical, sent a chill through Raj deeper than any heartbreak ever had. Hours later, Raj found himself seated in a small conference room at the Denver precinct, waiting to speak with detectives. He traced circles on the table absent-mindedly, counting his breaths. The walls felt too close, the air too stale. Detective Halliday entered with a manila folder and sat across from him. "We'll need your testimony," she said. "Given you're the spouse, your statement is central to proving intent and motive." Raj nodded stiffly. "I'll help however I can." Halliday slid the folder toward him, but kept a hand on it. "Before you see this, I need you to understand something. What we discovered today goes beyond marital abandonment or fraud. This wasn't a simple escape plan." Raj's throat tightened. "Just tell me." She opened the folder. Inside were printouts of financial transfers, large deposits, withdrawals, and small payments scattered across different accounts. But one thread connected them: money directed to the homeless woman whose body was found in the SUV. Not directly, but through disguised charity portals, prepaid cards, and forged vouchers. These transactions, Halliday explained, tie your wife, Anika, to the victim. It confirms she handpicked the woman, tracked her patterns, and ensured she'd be vulnerable enough to exploit. Raj stared, the horror sinking slowly into place. She used her, drugged her, and then staged the car. Halliday finished. "Yes." Raj swallowed the rising nausea, and Michael, he assisted with logistics. He has priors involving falsified accounts and laundering. She paused. "But from what we've seen so far, he wasn't the mastermind." Raj blinked. "You're saying it was her, overwhelmingly so." He leaned back, feeling the chair tremble under the weight of his disbelief. "I lived with her for 7 years." He whispered, 7 years. "I never saw anything like this." Halliday softened slightly. "People hide the darkest parts of themselves, Mr. Malhotra, sometimes exceptionally well." Moments later, a second detective entered, the one handling interrogations. He looked pale, shaken, as if he'd seen something he couldn't unsee. "We started interviews," he announced. Raj stiffened, and Michael cracked first. "He's in room 3. Halliday sighed. "We expected that." The detective looked at Raj directly. "He asked for you." Raj's heart thudded painfully. "For me? Why?" "He said he needed to warn you before she does something drastic." Halliday raised an eyebrow. "What's that supposed to mean?" The detective swallowed. "You should hear it yourself." Raj followed them down the hall, pulse hammering, senses sharpened. Behind a pane of glass, Michael Reeves sat, hunched over the interrogation table, shoulders shaking, eyes swollen from crying. He looked nothing like the confident man he had seen kissing Anika days before. Now he looked like someone who had finally realized he'd partnered with a monster. Michael lifted his head the moment Raj entered the observation room. His voice cracked through the speaker. "She lied to me," he sobbed. "She lied about everything." Raj stared, unblinking. Michael leaned forward, desperation flooding his face. "She promised she'd kill you next." Raj sat in the first row of the courtroom, hands clenched so tightly that his knuckles had turned white. The fluorescent lights hummed above him, giving everything a cold, sterile brightness, almost like a hospital corridor where terrible news was always delivered. He kept his eyes fixed on the defendant's table. On the far left sat Michael Reeves, shoulders shaking, eyes empty. On the right sat Anika, no, Nina, her posture perfect, expression unreadable, gaze cold enough to freeze the room. He had once loved that face, now it terrified him. The prosecutor, Karen Middleton, stood before the jury as she clicked her remote. The projector flickered to life, showing a timeline meticulously assembled from bank statements, emails, phone logs, and digital footprints. "Members of the jury," she began, "what you see here is not a spontaneous crime. This is a psychological blueprint, years of manipulation, deceit, and fraud." The room fell silent. A line chart appeared next, showing transfers Raj didn't recognize, money siphoned from their shared accounts long before the crash, credit cards he never applied for, loans he never approved, most linked to businesses that never existed. And then the more disturbing pattern, payments tied to identity, theft victims, some of whom had never recovered their names or credit histories. Each document felt like a blade. Raj's stomach twisted as Middleton circled the largest spike on the graph. "This," she said, "occurred 3 weeks before the crash. $50,000 transfer into an offshore account under the identity of," she clicked, "Nina Verma." Whispers erupted across the room. Raj stared forward, numb. The prosecutor wasn't finished. Another slide appear. D-mails between Anika and Michael spanning nearly 4 years. Plans, rendezvous, messages that dripped with intimacy and conspiratorial closeness. They spoke in code at times, but their meaning was unmistakable. The crash had been in the works long before it happened. His marriage hadn't ended 3 years ago. It had ended long before he ever knew. Then came the psychological profile, a chilling breakdown prepared by forensic experts. Anika's behavior, her calculated lies, her secret debts, her manipulation of Michael through promises of money and escape. She exhibited traits, the expert testified, consistent with antisocial personality disorder, superficial charm, emotional detachment, and a willingness to use others as disposable pieces. Raj felt heat crawl up his neck. Memories he once cherished cracked like glass Anika's, sudden distant moods, her unexplained absences, her insistence that he handled finances alone. He had mistaken exhaustion for stress, frustration for loneliness, secrecy for independence. He had mistaken danger for love. By midday, Michael took the stand again. His voice trembled as he spoke. "She planned everything, I thought. I thought we were running away together. She said we'd start over. She said the money would be enough for both of us." He paused, wiping his face. His voice dropped. "She never cared about me. I see that now. I was just the tool." Raj watched him with a conflicted mix of pity and rage. The prosecution then presented the digital evidence. Secure messages from Anika's hidden accounts, encrypted drive fragments recovered from Michael's old laptop, and GPS data showing their movements the night the homeless woman, the real victim, was abducted. The courtroom's tension thickened as a forensic analyst projected the reconstructed timestamps. "This," he said, pointing at the screen, "places both defendants within 2 blocks of the victim, less than 6 hours before the staged crash. Michael crumbled, burying his face in his hands. Anika, however, sat motionless. Her expression remained an empty void. Raj stared at her, searching for anything. Remorse, anger, shame. There was nothing. She could have been watching a business presentation instead of her own murder trial. As the afternoon proceeded, guilt wrapped around Raj like chains. He kept asking himself the same questions. The evidence whispered. How had he not seen it? How had he slept beside someone capable of orchestrating such cruelty? Had she ever loved him at all? The prosecutor approached the bench. Your Honor, the state has one more piece of evidence to submit for today's proceedings. Her voice held a quiet weight, the kind that made everyone in the courtroom straighten in their seats. Raj lifted his head. Anika shifted for the first time, a slight tightening of her jaw. The judge nodded. Proceed. The bailiff carried forward a sealed evidence bag and placed it on the counter. Inside was a phone, scorched at the edges but still intact. Raj felt his breath catch. He recognized it instantly. It was Anika's missing phone. The one investigators claimed was destroyed in the crash. Middleton continued, this device was recovered during a secondary excavation of the crash site by our forensic team last week. Contained within is a series of encrypted files. Our digital analysis unit successfully unlocked one of them late last night. She paused. The room held its breath. The file, she said slowly, is a video. Time. Stamped at 11:42 p.m. The night before the crash. Raj felt the world tilt. A video, recorded by Anika herself. Middleton nodded toward the technician, who wheeled a monitor to the center of the courtroom. With the court's permission, we will play it at tomorrow's session. The judge agreed. Raj's pulse thundered in his ears. A video from the night before everything burned. As the courtroom emptied, he stared at the blank monitor, dread coiling in his gut. Whatever that video contained, it wasn't going to just explain what happened. It was going to change everything. The courtroom still hadn't recovered from the shock of the previous moment. The lights had dimmed to play the newly discovered video, and when they brightened again, the air felt different, charged, metallic, almost humming with disbelief. Raj sat frozen in the witness row, the weight of what he had just heard crushing against his ribs. It wasn't that he hadn't suspected Anika's capacity for cruelty. It was that hearing her voice, her unmistakably calm voice, lay out his murder like a task on a to-do list, that was something no one could brace for. From the prosecutor's table, Ada Sand, who slowly exhaled, her hands still resting on the keyboard of the laptop used to project the video. Your Honor, she said quietly, for the record, the state moves to admit this into evidence as Exhibit 41. Judge Mendez nodded, though she too hadn't fully regained her composure, admitted. The jurors looked lost in their own spirals of shock. One leaned back so far his chair squeaked. Another pressed both hands over her mouth. The confession was crystalline in its malice. Anika stating that Raj's survival after the crash had ruined everything, that Michael's breakdown had forced her to improvise, and that she had no plans to clean up his weaknesses anymore. It was premeditation wrapped in ice. Raj's pulse thudded like it was trying to escape his body, the transition from the revelations of Chapter 7, the hidden phone, the exposure of years of manipulation, the unraveling facade, to this moment felt like being dragged from one nightmare into the next. The identity theft ring, the debts, the digital shadows she moved through, they had all painted a picture of her as a strategist, but this was the first time anyone was hearing her speak with such stripped-down intent. Michael, seated beside his attorney, stared at the table. His shoulders trembled, whether from shame or fear of what the video meant for him, Raj couldn't tell, but the man looked smaller than ever, like he had been hollowed out. Ada Sand, who addressed the court. This recording was taken the night before the crash. As you heard, the defendant recounts coordinating the staged accident and explicitly details her plan to murder Mr. Raj Mehta. We will later connect this confession with the financial transfers, the messages between burner phones, and Anika snapped her head up. Raj felt it before he saw it. The sudden shift, the cold blast of attention fixed solely on him. Her eyes were steady, disturbingly still. Judge Mendez noticed. Ms. Verma, you are advised to remain silent unless I want to speak, Anika said. Her attorney whispered urgently, Anika, don't. But she didn't even acknowledge him. The judge frowned. Ms. Verma, unless this is a procedural request, your attorney should. I said I want to speak. She rose to her feet, chains at her wrists clinking softly like punctuation marks to her defiance. To him. Every gaze in the courtroom swung toward Raj. This wasn't part of the trial procedure. This wasn't anything resembling strategy. This was a woman cornered, stripped of control, trying to reclaim even a splinter of it by aiming it directly at the one person she had failed to erase. Judge Mendez hesitated, the courtroom's tension multiplying by the second. Sit down, Ms. Verma, or I will have you removed. But Anika didn't sit. She took one step forward, her voice low but sharp enough to slice the air. You were never supposed to survive. A collective gasp swallowed the room. Raj felt the words hit him like a physical blow. His throat tightened, his breath locking. The judge finally motioned to the bailiff, who grabbed Anika's arm, but she didn't resist. She merely smirked, as though the damage she intended was already done. Ms. Verma, that is enough. The judge snapped. One more outburst and I will order the jury removed until your restraint can be assured. The bailiff guided Anika back into her seat. She sat down, the smirk fading into something colder, something like satisfaction. The courtroom erupted. Michael's attorney demanded a recess. Jurors whispered urgently to one another. Spectators craned their necks as though witnessing a celebrity meltdown. Even the reporters, usually so restrained, leaned forward with predatory interest. Judge Mendez slammed her gavel repeatedly. Order, order. But order wasn't possible anymore. Not after that video. Not after those words. Raj's hands trembled uncontrollably. He tried to steady them against his knees, but the tremors only spread. He could still hear her voice from the video, calculated and almost bored. Overlapping with the chilling clarity of her final sentence directed at him. He felt like the walls were closing in, each revelation dragging him deeper into a story he had thought he understood but clearly never had. Ada Sand, who approached him quietly, Mr. Mehta, she said, her voice hushed, are you able to continue being present for this session? We can ask for a recess. Raj shook his head, not trusting himself to speak. He didn't want to leave. He needed to see every piece, hear every word, no matter how agonizing. If he didn't, he feared she would twist the narrative again, even from behind bars. The judge finally regained control. Court will take a 15-minute recess. As people began rising, Michael suddenly looked at Raj, really looked, as though searching for forgiveness he knew he didn't deserve. I'm sorry, he whispered, barely audible. Raj didn't respond. The bailiff escorted Anika toward the holding area. Just before she disappeared through the door, she turned her head slightly, enough that only Raj would catch the movement, and gave him a look that wasn't triumph but promise. A promise that this wasn't over, and that was the part that terrified him most, because deep down he believed her. The courtroom felt as though it were holding its breath in the wake of Anika's chilling declaration, you were never supposed to survive. Even after the bailiff escorted her back to her seat and the judge ordered a brief recess to restore order, the echo of her words clung to the air like smoke that refused to dissipate. When proceedings finally resumed, a tension more suffocating than before spread across the room. What had been suspicion, disbelief, and horror was now carved into certainty. The jury returned to their box with wide eyes and tight jaws, still visibly shaken from the video and Anika's outburst. Raj sat motionless. Every beat of his heart felt like a bruise. The recorded confession had already hollowed him, but looking at Anika Nausch, shoulders slumped, hands clasped as if she were the victim, twisted the knife. The woman he once thought he loved had dismantled every illusion in a single afternoon. Yet he forced himself to stay present. He owed that much to the truth. The judge nodded to the prosecution. "Mr. Halden, you may proceed with your closing argument." Prosecutor James Halden rose with unhurried confidence. He adjusted his glasses, walked to the center of the room, and faced the jury with a solemnity that demanded their full attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, voice calm but resonant, "you have seen manipulation, you have seen deceit, you have seen cruelty executed with precision and purpose, but to date, you have also seen the truth." He let the silence settle before continuing. "You watched a woman confess to orchestrating the staged crash meant to kill her own husband. You watched her admit to coercing an accomplice and then discarding him when his conscience interfered. You watched her reveal that this scheme, this horrifying betrayal, was not an impulse, but a long, planned execution." Anika shifted in her chair, sniffing dramatically. Halden did not acknowledge her. "What you have also seen," he continued, "is the mountain of evidence supporting every piece of this puzzle." He clicked a remote. The courtroom screen illuminated with a timeline, clean, chronological, damning. "Let's start with the emails," Halden said. "Not one or two, but 43 messages in which the defendant hinted, suggested, or outright demanded that Michael stay on script. Messages where she rehearsed the crash, timed the route, and calculated Raj's chances of survival with disturbing indifference." Slide. Next appeared the GPS trail, marking the movements of Anika's car on the night before the crash, the night she claimed to have been homesick. Her phone, Halden said, tells another story, a story of surveillance. She followed Raj's commute multiple times, testing visibility, speed, traffic patterns. She was preparing. Slide. The financial records emerged, transfers from Anika's hidden accounts to Michael over several months. "These were not random gifts," Halden said. "These were payments for compliance, for silence. And when Michael tried to back out, when the weight of what he'd agreed to finally struck him, the defendant improvised a plan that almost killed two men instead of one." Anika finally broke the silent act. Her voice rose, trembling. "You don't know what happened. Michael lied. He always lied." The judge's gavel cracked through her protest. "Ms. Sharma, you will remain silent." Halden simply waited. He didn't need to argue with her. The evidence had already spoken. Slide. The forensic reconstruction appeared next. The angle of the impact, the tampering with Raj's brake line, the marks on the road showing where the crash had been forced. The jurors watched with widened eyes as experts demonstrated how the staged accident was engineered to appear random, but was, in fact, meticulously calculated. Every component, Halden said quietly, was crafted to ensure a fatality, not an injury, a fatality. He let that word linger. Then he turned slowly toward Raj, and the intended fatality was sitting right there, alive today only because the execution of the plan faltered. Raj's fingers tightened around the edge of the bench. His throat burned. Halden walked back to the jury box, lowering his voice as though confiding in them. "Throughout this trial, the defense attempted to portray Ms. Sharma as a frightened woman manipulated by circumstance, but you witnessed the real Anika Sharma. When confronted with her own words, her own face, she did not cry for forgiveness. She did not deny what she'd done. Instead, she chose to taunt her victim." He paused. "You were never supposed to survive." The quote reverberated again, invisible and heavy. "That," Halden said, "is not remorse. That is not confusion. That is intent." Anika covered her face with her hands and began to sob. It might have appeared tragic if the courtroom had not just watched her calmly describe the logistics of murder. Haldon did not soften. The defense will tell you she was under stress, that Michael pressured her, that she never meant harm, but intent is not measured by tears shed after exposure. Intent is measured by action, planning, preparation, execution. He stepped back, gesturing to the mass of evidence behind him. And intent, he concluded, has been proven, beyond any reasonable doubt. He let out a slow breath. Ladies and gentlemen, justice now rests in your hands. With that, Haldon returned to his seat. The defense attorney stood to offer a rebuttal, but the words felt thin, desperate. He argued coercion, confusion, emotional instability. He pleaded for sympathy. He tried to paint Anika as the true victim of her upbringing, of financial pressure, of Michael's influence, but the jury's faces remained impassive. They had seen too much. Even Anika sensed the shift. The tears dried, her gaze hardened, flicking between the jurors and Rod, calculating again. The judge finally signaled for silence. Members of the jury, he said, voice steady, you will now retire to deliberate. He lifted a sealed envelope from the clerk's desk. But before you do, the court has received the final procedural clearance to announce the verdict. The room froze. Raj felt his pulse pounding in his ears as the judge prepared to read. Everything, all of it, was about to come to an end or a beginning. The judge broke the seal, and the courtroom fell silent. The courtroom felt different the morning after the verdict, emptier somehow, as if the very walls had absorbed the emotional weight of the past weeks and finally exhaled. Raj walked in slowly, shoulders tense, still hearing echoes of the judge's voice from yesterday, guilty on all counts. The words replayed in his mind like a scratched recording, both satisfying and deeply painful. He sat in the same seat he had occupied since the trial began, staring at the polished wooden floor where Anika had stood just hours earlier. The woman he once loved, trusted, even defended, was now shackled, her mask ripped away, her crimes laid bare. Yet despite everything, despite the lies and the violence and the betrayal, Raj felt an ache in his chest he could not fully understand. Love didn't vanish just because it had been poisoned. The courtroom murmurs faded as the bailiff led Anika in for sentencing. Her wrists were cuffed, her posture sharp and rigid. Gone were the trembling tears she had used in her last attempt to manipulate the jury. Today she wore no performance, only a hollow, controlled fury simmered in her eyes. She did not scan the room for sympathy. She looked only at Raj. The judge cleared his throat. Ms. Anika Rao, this court sentences you to 35 years in state custody for the combined convictions of fraud, attempted murder, criminal conspiracy, and manslaughter. His voice carried no hesitation. You have shown no remorse for your actions, and the evidence presented reveals a disturbing pattern of manipulation, deception, and violence. A quiet gasp rippled across the courtroom. 35 years, it was more than many expected, but less than the life sentence the prosecution had subtly hoped for. Anika's jaw tightened, though her expression did not crack. The judge continued, you intentionally orchestrated harm against those closest to you. You exploited identities, relationships, and trust for personal gain, and you displayed complete disregard for human life. Raj lowered his gaze. Every word felt like sandpaper against his skin. The judge concluded, you are hereby remanded into the custody of the Department of Corrections, effective immediately. The gavel struck, a harsh, final sound. Anika didn't flinch. 2 officers stepped forward to take her away, but she lifted her chin and said, wait. The courtroom stilled, even the officers hesitated. She turned her head slightly, just enough to see Raj fully, to burn her stare into him one last time. You think this ends with me? She whispered, not a threat, not a plea, a statement. Raj felt his pulse spike. What does that mean? A faint, chilling smile touched her lips. You were never supposed to survive, Raj, but you did, and now you'll see what that changes. Before he could respond, the officers pulled her toward the back exit. Her chains clinked softly, the sound trailing after her like a fading echo, and then she was gone, just like that. The final chapter of the woman he once believed he would marry had closed, not with answers, not with forgiveness, but with a fractured silence he didn't know how to fill. Outside the courthouse, a cold wind swept across the steps. Reporters clustered around the entrance, cameras flashing, microphones raised, voices blending into a frantic storm of questions. Raj ignored them. He descended the stairs slowly, a heaviness in his limbs. Every step felt like wading through memories he no longer wanted to carry. He reached the bottom and paused. For the first time in months, he was free, not safe, not yet, but free from her shadow. Still, freedom came with its own kind of grief. He had loved the version of Anika he believed existed, the loyal partner, the ambitious dreamer, the woman who held his hand under streetlights and whispered promises of forever. But that woman had never been real. She had been a costume, a character crafted to blend into his life until she no longer needed him. Raj exhaled slowly, closing his eyes. She chose to vanish rather than love. The pain of that truth settled deep, but so did the strange relief. Truth, no matter how brutal, was a cleaner wound than lies. A familiar voice approached from behind. Raj, Detective Mira said gently, "Are you all right?" He opened his eyes and managed a faint smile. "I don't know, that's normal." She stepped beside him. "You survived someone who didn't want you to. That changes a person." He nodded. "I keep wondering if any part of her ever cared." Mira hesitated. "Maybe, but caring and loving aren't the same. She cared enough to use you. She just didn't love enough to protect you." Raj didn't respond. The truth was too sharp. A few minutes passed before Mira added, "If you ever need anything, I know," he said softly. "Thank you." He turned to leave, feeling the wind push against him, an invisible force urging him forward. Life would go on. He would heal. He would rebuild. He had to believe that. As he reached his car, he pulled out his phone, intending to turn it off for the rest of the day. Silence sounded good, heavenly even, but before he could press the button, the screen lit up. A notification, unknown number, a single text message. Raj frowned and opened it. The message contained just 3 words. She wasn't the only one. The phone trembled slightly in his hand. Somewhere inside him, a cold dread unfurled. The dead were gone, but the danger wasn't.